Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I'm Courtney Anderson, and this is episode 213. Episode 213. Episode 213 of Solutions with Courtney Anderson is a show that is part of our Financial Fierceness series. And our Financial Fierceness series is where you and I are absolutely laser focused and fierce with our determination to ensure that we have our finances utilized in a way that is part of our ongoing process to surpass our goals and practice the joyful art of business. And when we talk about surpassing our goals, one of the things with our finances, this could be our individual finances, it could be a unit that we have a large amount of decision making within, maybe a family or a small business. And the idea, of course, is that we often are focusing on getting to the point where the finances are an exciting and important part of our lives, but they are not something that creates stress, anxiety, and fear. And that's because we reach and then attain and sustain financial independence. That's the place we get to where we don't have a situation where if something goes wrong, meaning we lose our job if we're employed, working as an employee, or we lose our business, that it will result in us having to face financial discomfort or ruin. So financial independence is that we have diversified resources that are asset producing and that we are conservative in many of our decision making processes, always remembering not what we earn or obtain, but what we keep. Right? That's the key. So financial independence is one of the things that we focus on, and this is a show that it's tantalizing in many ways. It touches on several different aspects of our relationship with ourselves and with others, and I find to be very thought-provoking. So specifically here in episode 213, our show is Money Doesn't Buy Happiness, but it buys options. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys options. Okay, so I mentioned this being tantalizing. The first part of this show topic is that money doesn't buy happiness. And the second part is, but it buys options, this thing called options. So let's delve into this. And I do mention, please drop by CourtneyAnderson.com. That is our central website and repository. And we have a wealth of resources. Every day we add additional content. So we've got this program where this is our 213th episode of this audio podcast or our radio talk show. We have a companion video show. We also have articles and upcoming ebooks, seminars, webinars, courses, all kinds of things that are in process. And the intention when you come to our website, CourtneyAnderson.com, is that it is an ongoing library, repository of resources for you. So it's not something you come to and you look around in a few minutes and you're done, because there is a wealth of resources. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of content are on our site, and more content, as I said, being added daily. And that's because this is an ongoing, again, resource and repository for you to come back to. We're working together, building relationships to help you surpass your goals. And so there's a show site page, right? So part of the CourtneyAnderson.com site, there's a micro site that is just for this program, where you'll see links, you'll see our show sponsor, affiliate ads, and you'll also see, I go back through often and I'll add additional articles or things that I'll read that might relate to the topic. So I do ask that you drop by there. Money is one of those things that is fascinating. And it's not that money itself is fascinating, although some people, of course, are actual experts and are people who are fascinated by currency. So some people are fascinated by, literally the physical paper currency, or physical, minerals or coin content. That's a subset. But most people are, when they talk about money, what they're talking about is what it represents. It represents resources. So it's not money itself, it's what money represents. It's what money, we humans understand this, itself is meaningless. We just agree that this physical piece of paper, or now this digital notation, equals something that we've agreed to give value. It doesn't inherently have that. It's just a way that we structure our modern societies. But one of the things I think that makes it so fascinating is because so many problems and so much stress and so much anxiety is around the lack of money. I've mentioned in programs that as a lawyer, as an attorney, when I did my traditional full-time law practice in the past, now I do a virtual law firm with a limited practice of select clients. The challenge is, and I do volunteer work as a lawyer. The challenge when I've done family law issues, divorces, child custody, so often we're not even talking about the actual relationship. What we're talking about is the consequence of a lack of resources. So if someone is worried that they can't pay their bills, and because they can't pay their bill, their utilities were cut off, because their utilities are cut off, they can't stay where they were living because there's no heat, or there's no cooling, or there's no water, because they didn't pay their bills, their vehicle was repossessed. When their vehicle is repossessed, they have no ability then to use their vehicle to get their child to school, or their elderly relative to the hospital. They have no ability to get themselves to work. I mean, these things domino. And a lot of the anxiety, again, and the anger and the angst comes from the lack of resources. And lack of resources, of course, limits your options. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people who have such a poorly defined sense of self that they, and I believe usually I believe it usually comes from a hopeful intent. That someone who has, again, a poorly defined sense of self, so they'll think, well, I myself don't have an understanding of what makes me intrinsically valuable. I myself don't have an understanding of what makes me worth being loved, or what makes me worth being trusted, or what makes me worth being cared about or invested in emotionally by other people. So what I'll do is I'll use money as a proxy. And if I can just accumulate enough money, then other people will love the money, right? And they'll respect the money, and then thus that'll sort of reflect on me. And we see this all around the world, right? Where people, and I believe it's something we can understand. We all want to feel confident that we have value. We all want to feel confident that we are worth being loved. We all want to be confident that we're worth anything, that we have an intrinsic value as just being an entity. We've done shows on the issue where people feel that they're invisible, right? That they feel like they go through life like a ghost, that no one really sees them, that no one really hears them, that no one ever, touches them. That's painful. So again, we can understand someone who desires these universal things. The challenge is if someone goes out and they obtain money, whether they work, very hard and or they sometimes, sadly, will do illegal things. Not even for the fact that they like to do illegal things, but just for the money, right? So maybe somebody will go and get education and go work on Wall Street and finance and earn relatively large sums of money, and someone else would say, well, that wasn't an option that I perceived, so I went out and sold stolen property. Okay. We are not our things. And this is, of course, a whole nother show delving into this, but we're not. Partially because the stuff is transitory. And one of the things that I said that was so interesting as a lawyer full time was watching the family dynamics that were built around, sadly, the lack of resources and lack of options drowned out what often was real love and affection for another person. But it just got too difficult. It's difficult. People, the cliche, you can't live on love. Right? Maybe they had companionship and real affection, but they were unable to get food to eat. And the other thing is that in bankruptcies, as a lawyer, I saw on many occasions someone who define themselves by their things. And when you start down that path, right, of wanting to be loved, wanting to be respected, wanting to be valued by your stuff, then what tends to happen is people think, well, I need more stuff to get more love and value and respect. And then you get into that sort of arms race. I had one car, I have 10 cars, I have 20 cars, I have one house, I have 5 houses, I have 15 houses, I have one plane, I have 10 planes. And before people know it, then they're broke. Because resources, as what money represents, what we as societies, as humans, is sort of imaginary, come up with these systems, right, where we say it's worth X number of units and that these units are tradable on whatever market for this number of goods or services. We make all this stuff up, but there's a finite amount of it that one person holds. Now, governments, in many instances, what they have the apparatus to do is to just create more. But when you do that, it devalues the individual worth of each individual unit, right? So when you just go print more money, then unfortunately now you've flooded your currency, and you have so much of it, just each individual item is worth less, right? And that's where governments get into trouble. People don't do that. Humans individually and businesses don't have the ability to go out and just go print more money. Now, some places engage in fraud where they make imaginary invoices or imaginary earning statements where they pretend like they have more, but that's not the same thing. What I'm saying is individuals at some point, even if you had, $1 million or $100 million or $100 or $2 or $2 billion, at some point, if you had that and you spend it all, it's all gone. Now you're broke. And what tends to sometimes drive that is somebody who, again, it's understandable why we all want to be loved, valued, respected, feel like we're worthy. And if you believe your only value and worth is reflected in your stuff, right? Either literally stuff like I have this much, money in some account somewhere, or the display of stuff. Look at my car, look at my shiny tires, look at my jewelry, look at my, look at all these things. And when you do that, then of course, the more that you are desperately desiring love, attention, respect, and value, the more stuff you go acquire, and then you run out of money. So what is it worth then? Because what's the point in having a financial fierceness series and talking about financial independence, and I, say, oh, we're going to attain it, maintain it, and sustain it, and all this? What's the point of any of it? Well, the point of it is, ideally, that we're going to have some relationship with our resources so that we have enough of a predefined space to operate within with some sense of safety. So if you've ever been in a situation where you were out of resources or about to be out of resources, and I did a show in our failure flashback series, very a show about where I was broke and how that felt, how it feels awful. Being broke, the thing of being out of money, it's not necessarily that I'm in the abstract, money represents this amount of worth that I can use in this system to acquire or procure goods and services. No, what it is I have somebody who's saying I owe them this amount of resources, right? Maybe it's my utility company. And if I don't have it, then they're telling me the consequences, and they're going to not, sell me anymore. So I won't have any more electricity. They're going to turn it off. And if that does happen, then again, what do you do now? Because you can't do many of the modern things that we do. If you don't have any water, you're not going to be able to brush your teeth or take a shower and get clean. So this impacts us. And the anxiety of being the heightened and prolonged anxiety of the constant worry. Are they going to turn that off? Or will they turn? Well, can I get them to turn it on? How am I going to eat? How am I going to get something? How am I going to, brush my teeth or wash myself? That anxiety prolonged. There's so much research. What that does to us psychologically and emotionally, extended the deprivation and just the heightened constant, worry. And I have had such good fortune in many ways in my life to have um, grown up in an environment without any of that. Honestly, my family, where I grew up, had careers and professions, and I never ever ever worried or experienced anything about food insecurity ever. I had a bit of a typical situation. I grew up in my father was in the United States military, and so most of my life I lived on military installations. They have little posts, military posts or bases that they'll build the military, and that's where they house people and people work, and they had schools and hospitals. It's a little tiny micro society, and that's what I grew up in. It's just it's different from it's a mainstream society, right? Because everybody that lives there is a part of this, this the adults all are, work or related to people who work for the institution, and then the children are in this environment where there's no such thing on those posts as homelessness because everybody lives in housing. The government provides it. It's a very different situation than most environments, especially in in the U.S. But that or anywhere around the world where those posts are located from sort of society at large, because it's removed from a lot of the typical challenges you'll have in a system that's not supported by um, that type of system. But it's the options. It's the options. It's what the money represents. Oh, so if I have 50 units, right? So dollars or euro, whatever, it's irrelevant what the currency is. But if I have 50 of these units, and I know that I could go, eat something for 2 of the units, and then I could maybe do something fun, right? Maybe I could watch a movie, right? For 7 units. Then it gives me options. Now then I have to decide. I mean, I could go spend all of my 50 units on, one thing, and then not have anything to eat. That's the choice we get into when we talk about a lot of the practical applied decision making we do in our financial fierceness, right? Everything about our credit score, and please access those programs if you haven't. Managing finances, what types of debt in terms of making decisions with, investing in real estate or businesses. So those are the types of questions of, okay, I have a certain amount of units. I could either spend all of them on one thing, or I could spend part of them on a couple of things, or I could spend none of it and just hold on to the units. That's the basic question, right? And it's about the options. And as I said, the financial independence is this idea of creating that sort of, it's not, we understand as adults and critical thinkers, nothing's guaranteed, right? So it's not guaranteed safe. But in an environment where within parameters that we've set up, okay, we have a stream of resources that we either are holding and appreciating, or that are income producing assets that we then can calculate. Okay, it's going to make this many units, and we know that our food, choices usually we spend this much, and our utilities, we spend this much or whatever, and that gives us a safer space. As I said, when you're in a type of environment, you don't tend to believe that you could just spend anything. I mean, the wealthiest person that exists on our planet at this exact second could go spend all of their money on like one thing and be broke. Now, of course, depending on how wealthy they are, people think, well, what one thing? There's something that's so valuable or something that would be so risky or whatever. Yeah, they could. Or they could put all of their money into one, hey, I'm going to build, a teleportation device to, planet Mars or something. I don't know, but they could do that. They don't. They're just doing it the same version of what everybody else does. I have so many units, and I'm going to allocate some for, food, and some for shelter, and some for comfort, and then maybe some for entertainment. They just have a bigger amount of options because they have more resources. And so what we're all looking at, and what I am advising in our financial fierceness series, and is that we're going to set up a system that within that system, We're going to make the conservative, again, decisions where we're going to plan and strategize, right? So I have so many units, I'll spend this much on this much on that, this much on this. And then I'm not in that situation where somebody is when they don't have any units, right? But they don't have any money. And they're saying, my goodness, the bill was due, or my baby's hungry. I have nothing. I have nothing. I have no resources. I have no way to get any resources. I have nothing I can sell. I have nothing I can, liquidate or borrow against. I'm just out of options. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Because when someone gets in that type of situation and they're prolonged that type of situation, what do? Well, people have really poor choices ahead of them. What do you do when, you're hungry? You have a child, your child's hungry. What do you do? Well, a lot of people say, well, their child's going to eat. They're going to do whatever it takes. And you have these cases, you study them in law school. The law and the ethics of it, right? So here's somebody, their child's starving, and they steal, an apple or a piece of bread so their child won't die of malnutrition. Is it illegal? Yes. What do we do as a society? How do you respond to that? What's the right thing to do in terms of ethics and morals? These are all the types of things that we explore in these settings. But in our real day-to-day lives, these are all applied. Every day we apply these. And when we talk about these types of situations, what a lot of us will do is say, well, a lot of people make really poor choices with their money. And that's true. Some people do have the same, right, amount of units. And then instead of saying, okay, I'll spend this much on food, I'll spend this much on utilities, I'll spend this much on, shelter, they take it all and they spend it on, alcohol. You shouldn't spend all of your money on alcohol, because then what are you going to eat? And many of us in our lives, and we read in the media around the world, we see these examples and we say, well, what can we do? People make really poor choices, and people do make poor choices, including you and I. We've all made poor choices in our lives. I know I have, and I've shared many of them in our program. I'm sure you have. The key is that we want to think ahead. That's why we talk about goal setting. That's why we talk about strategizing all the time, because we want to be in a situation where we have a plan. And what I'm asking in this episode is that we recognize the money is not the plan to happiness. The money is the plan to having enough resources and a conservative plan with alternative contingencies, right? That's why I have some things invested here. I have diversification. I've got different types of assets, so that when something goes wrong, I can, oh my goodness, I can't access that, or something happened with that resource, and I have this other one, right? That's what we're talking about. And we also want to really disassociate our value and worth and our emotional well-being from money itself. We want to create a safe environment where we can sustain ourselves and any, family members, right? Includes our pets and other plants and everything else, right? And that takes some self-discipline, so that we don't go spend every single thing all on one item, and then we don't have the resources to continue to take care of ourselves. It takes some self-discipline. But the easiest way to look at it is to realize this isn't about my happiness. This is just a way to maintain myself. Just got to make good choices over a long period of time, like with our health, right? Watch what I'm eating, be cognizant and aware of my exercise plan, and stick with that. It's not always glamorous, but it's part of creating a safer and hopefully an outcome more conducive, an environment more conducive to good outcomes, right? So I don't go watch my diet and my fitness or anything just because I'm so focused on, well, if I look, quote, attractive, then I'll be happy. No, that's unhealthy. We get people in all kinds of unhealthy decisions. People abuse, steroids. They abuse their bodies. People do all kind of really, again, it's that same thing where you're trying to, with this poorly defined sense of self, use this other item as a proxy to attain love, value, respect, and all of that. It doesn't work. We know how unhealthy that is. So in this show, I think it's really important, which is why I spent this time reiterating the panoply of reasons why I don't concur with money equating happiness. Now, this is a idea that's out in societies around the world where people say, yeah, it does. No, it doesn't. What it does, though, that could result in potentially a safer environment and could result in potentially someone having a better quality of life, which then may result in them potentially being happier, is it gives you options. Now remember, like I said earlier, we still have the same question. I only have so many widgets. Whether I'm the poorest person or the wealthiest person on the planet, I have so many widgets. Now the question is how I'm going to allocate them. Obviously, the more widgets I have, the unit of currency, then the more choices I have, the more options. So if I have more widgets, I can do more. Right? If I have less, I can do less. This isn't anything that's difficult for us to understand. And the challenge is as we look at this, how do we view the options? Right? So are the options something, well, I have more options, so I'll go out and I'll buy this fancy piece of clothing, and then I'll wear that, and then when people see how fancy it is and they see the name of the clothing, then they'll know that I'm valuable because the clothing's valuable. No, now because we've gotten back to that very unhealthy process where we're trying to use these items, whether it's the widget or what I can attain with the widget, as a proxy for our own value. Of course not. Our value is separate from these things. What we should be doing with the options is understanding, and I say being grateful for them, and using those options to accrue more options. That's why when in all these programs, in all the financial fierceness programs, I keep coming back to these ideas of it's about what we hold on to. It's not about how much we earn. It's not about how much we make. It's about how much we keep. And when we have more resources, then we want to think longer term and create more potential options down the road. In a very simplistic sense, if someone has, and we did a show, right? We did a show in this series. We talked about why having a quote good job, making quote good income, is not necessarily going to make somebody wealthy. And part of the problem is because part of people just spend up to whatever it is that they earn, especially in jobs, right? So if somebody has a job and they go and they do a very great plan, and they look at how many units they have, and they say, okay, I'm going to spend this much on housing, I spend this much on utilities, and this much on clothing, and I'm great. Then the problem is that something comes along unexpected and it throws off their system, right? Something broke down. Their appliance broke down, their washer or their vehicle broke down. And they need their vehicle to, they live somewhere where there is no public transportation that's readily accessible, and they're not close to where they need to go for work or school. Now all of a sudden, even though their plan, which people often call budget, was perfect, right? Well, it worked. It worked as long as there were no other variables, as long as nothing changed or nothing that was unexpected came into life. How often in life do you go through life and nothing unexpected happens? Like that never happens. There's always something that you didn't anticipate, right? And so the idea of having more options financially means that, oh, something broke, my appliance or my vehicle. Oh, well, now I have those other units that I'd saved, or I have that other income producing asset that I can take some of that money that I'd allocated for something else, but I'll have to, move it here. Or people will have saved money in savings. Sometimes it's called the emergency fund, for exactly what it sounds like, an emergency. But I'm making 2 points in this show. One, I'm really trying to get people to think about, just explore in your own mind, what does money represent to you? And if you think that money represents, power or privilege or status or value, I would argue that's a problem. Because what happens when the money goes away? And more destructive than that, how are you spending the money now? If you believe the money is a proxy for, or the money is what's the reason why you're treated nicely, it's the reason why people give deference to you. It impacts the way then that you're making decisions. Often to your own detriment. You're not buying things or investing in things you want. You're just doing things because you think that that's what other people want, or you think that's what makes people think you're special. You see this all the time. People spend money that's disproportionate to what they should on clothes or accessories or jewelry or whatever, thinking, well, this will make other people, like me or respect me. No, it won't. One of the things in our media, in our global media, that we all, humans around our societies, we put up the very, famous and wealthy person, and we all look and see when they do, horrible things. They made a bad business decision, or maybe they engaged in really poor choices in their personal life. Maybe sometimes they even do criminal things. We have to separate our value as an individual from the resources. And we need to have the ability to make decisions about resources and in a way that's not emotional. It's not driven by, I really want to be loved. I really want people to value and see me. Then we're not making choices at all, because we're driven by these hugely powerful emotional needs, which aren't going to be met through the stuff. When we separate that and we look at the fact that, okay, this gives me options, then I can make the choices that are good for me and for my dreams, desires, and interests. And what other people think of me and what other people think of my decisions is not my concern. The whole idea, we've talked about this in other shows, right, of keeping up with the Joneses, this whole idea that we go out of our way to try to make other people think we're great. It's such a destructive path. You are you, and that is enough. You deserve to be loved, valued, and respected just because you're you. Now let's look at how many units you have, right? Your resources, and let's make some good plans so that we can invest in today and have alternative, diversified plans for tomorrow. Tomorrow may be literally tomorrow. Tomorrow may be 50 years from now. And because you're making these decisions based on your surpassing your goals, again, for creating that safe environment for you, for any family, friends, or people in your community of caring to be in, knowing that, okay, we've got a way to get something healthy to eat. We've got a way to get water to clean ourselves. It sounds like sometimes I think people think, well, that's just nothing. I mean, that's not even worth thinking about. Yeah, it is. And if you've ever been in a situation where you didn't have access to those things, it was a huge reminder of how important this is. And there are literally hundreds of millions of people on our shared planet who don't have reliable access to these things. And it is the most important thing, because if you can't eat and sustain yourself, obviously your physical body won't be able to continue at some point, or you suffer very serious health considerations. And access to water is so important for hygiene, for disease control. I mean, it's so important. When you get to the point that we're fortunate enough and grateful enough, and I really think we should be grateful and appreciative if we have access to these things, then I would argue, have a responsibility to ourselves to create really good options, so that if a vehicle breaks or the washer breaks, it might be a little inconvenient. Oh, I've got to go and get that other account information so I can get the money out of that account to pay for this. It's a little inconvenient, but okay, it's fine. When you don't have the options and you haven't planned ahead, then something happens, your vehicle needs to be repaired, the appliance needs to be repaired, and you can't do it because you don't have any way to do it. And often that one little thing is what will snowball someone from seemingly a quote, good life, all the way into complete financial destruction, because the car broke down and they couldn't get to work, and they were fired, and they were fired from the job, and they couldn't pay their rent, and they couldn't pay their rent, and then they were evicted, and they were at the homeless shelter. I mean, it just spirals. And for many people, it spirals really quickly because there's no option. There's no backup. You want to have your original plan. Most people do budget. That's your plan A. And you need your backup plan. What if something unexpected happens or something breaks? And you need to have a plan C, another alternative. You need to have a plan D. You may need to have a plan through Z. And that's why when I use the word conservative, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that you're going to think and strategize out long term and understand that you can't take things for granted. What if your vehicle broke and then right after that there was a hurricane? Right now, see, it starts to stack on itself. Now, if you planned ahead, right, and you took some of your resources earlier, and you said, you know what, I don't have to get the most expensive insurance policy that covers all of these types of things that very rarely happen, but I will. The reason you do that is so that you, again, that's part of you laying your plan, B, C, D, E, E, F, G. You may never need that insurance policy for that. It may never happen that there's that natural disaster. But if you got it, good. That's why you do things like that. And that's why people who, like I said a while ago, thinking about a safe environment, you're trying to do all you can. We all know, we all read shared human history. Anything could happen. A meteor could hit, our planet or something. There could be all kind of things that could happen that'll wipe out all of our plans, A through Z. And then, like I said earlier, we're still we're still going to have our own value and our own worth defined by who we are, no matter what happens. But what we're trying to do is think ahead. I'm a strategist. Obviously, that's what I do for my business clients and what I do for people that I individually do coaching and career strategy and planning with. We're thinking ahead. We're planning. It doesn't mean that this is, again, it's not a guarantee, but it's about having options. And you're setting those up ahead of time. You're not waiting till something happens and then scurrying around. What am I going to do? It's too late then. Because you may be in a situation where you didn't have the option. Now the thing happened. You had no plan B, and now you're stuck having to deal with whatever is as it is, with whatever resources you have or don't have. And that's why you think ahead. And that's why you defer spending money on things today that you might have enjoyed, right? Like buying an insurance policy or doing something like this. You're thinking, why do I need this? Well, many people will argue you don't, right? That rarely happens. My point is, that's why the whole point person buying insurance, just in case it does. Does that reallocate some of your resources away from something for today or even tomorrow you might enjoy for something that potentially might not happen? Yes, but that is the challenge when we look at our finances. And again, it's not the math of it. None of this is the math of it. It's the emotions of it. What does the money represent? How do I define myself by this? One of the things that I've mentioned in other programs, just because somebody has resources doesn't make them rich. Just because somebody doesn't have resources doesn't make them poor. Now, I use those words at times like everyone else does, and the reason because they convey a meaning very quickly, right? But the challenge is that as a person, if you start to see yourself that way, right? So if you wake up and you're brushing your teeth, you're getting ready for the day, and you're thinking, I'm rich, right? You start to see yourself differently. And my point is, you're not rich or you're not poor. You just happen to be in a situation where you either have resources or don't have resources, relatively speaking, at that time. And you'll hear people, and as you go through life, people will say, well, I used to be rich or I used to be poor. You didn't used to be that. You were still the same you. You just were you with more or less resources. And it's really important because you have to define yourself in ways that are consistent throughout your life, irrespective of what happens with these external issues. And the way that people begin to behave, often in ways that are self-destructive and destructive to others, is when they start defining themselves this way. Well, I'm poor, and this is what poor people do. I'm rich, this is what rich people do. No, it isn't. Stop that. You're you, and you're still accountable for the exact same ethics and morals and spiritual or religious beliefs and frameworks and cultural expectations you had before. Stop all this. You're not that thing. You're just you with some stuff or without stuff. And if you look at it that way, and again decouple you from the options, life can then result often in more contentment and more stability because you planned ahead. So this show was a little bit more focused on bringing in these emotional and psychological issues that are there, but they underpin the decisions we make financially, and often they derail them. All you want are options. And people who are that's what, when we look at people who we think, wow, what a brilliant business person. Often it's because they coupled strategic risk taking, because you have to take risks, right, with a consistent long-term conservative plan where they were thinking A, B, C, D, E, F, G backup plan. But they also know that the only way I'm going to acquire additional opportunities is to take strategic risks. But they weren't sort of wild and capricious risks. They weren't unplanned or strategized. They weren't just sort of running around in the dark, throwing darts everywhere. No. You got to think. You have to strategize. You have to plan. For what? For the goal, for surpassing the goal. And if it's financial independence, you have to have a plan. You have to maintain that plan. And then you create a safe space where within that space, oh, okay, I feel pretty confident, not guaranteed, but pretty confident I'll have water so I can clean myself tomorrow. I'll have food for my nutrition. Okay. And then I can, within that safer space, then be able to explore other things that are much more important, right? Relationships with other people, joy, all the things that we talk about in our program. I can't go around practicing the joy of our business if I'm starving and I don't have any water. But we have to change the way that we look at these things so we can begin to make decisions based on understanding what money represents in terms of it's a unit that we can trade for a good or service. And that's it. It doesn't make me prettier, smarter, or better. It doesn't make me funnier or more attractive. You're still you. And you really need to understand this, because when we get people, again, in these very self-destructive situations, it's because, again, trying to use the money as a proxy for their own value that they have not determined. So take responsibility, determine your own value, your own worth, your ethics, your beliefs, and then get out there and then think and plan in a very logical way, in a dispassionate way, about how you're going to use those units, what the money represents, for options. And that then does create potentially a safer environment so that you got choices. So, I lost my job. I'm not happy about that. I'm sad. But at least I know I'm going to have water and food and utilities, and I have time to regroup and think about what I'm going to do next. Or, oh my goodness, my business failed. Oh, I'm not happy. I'm sad. I'm horrible. This makes me very sad. Maybe I'm sad. Maybe I have options. Maybe I have resources. So maybe I'll take a vacation and sit in a vacation place that makes me feel better while I'm thinking about how sad I am. Do you see? It's options. If you don't have any options, then you're just left at the mercy of the world. Now, it depends on where you live in the world, what the laws are, what the societal expectations are. But you put yourself in a situation where you're going to be much more vulnerable. And our goal is to connect with other people, have a community of caring, so we have people, emotionally, in terms of our companionship and our love and care about us in our lives, but having a financial plan ahead of time. So, oh my goodness, the appliance broke, my vehicle broke, oh, I lost my job, I was fired, I quit. Maybe they're trying to make me do something illegal at that place. Who knows? My business failed. Whatever it is that happens. Oh, there's a health issue. Okay. None of that stuff is good. I'm upset about it. I'm sad. A bad thing happened, but I have options. It doesn't, because I planned ahead and strategized and have my financial independence, I'm still upset about this horrible thing, or I'm scared, or I'm worried, but I have options. I'm not panicked. How am I going to pay my mortgage or my house note in a few weeks? No, I have resources. And that also gives me time, right? Because when I have resources financially, okay, take care of the water, utilities, food, a place to live, that also gives me time to continue to sit and think, okay, what's my next option? And this is the most exciting, intoxicating, awesome part of our financial fierceness practice in real life. When you do this in real life and you sit and you make all these options, you can plan B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z. And then the longer you live, I've experienced anecdotally, the longer you live, even though in your mind, when you're making that sacrifice, because it's always a sacrifice, right? It's a trade-off. I could either get the insurance or do this. I can invest this money here, or I could go buy something else. But you make trade-offs. When you make those trade-offs, it may be that other people say, why are you doing this? One of the things that I've mentioned in other shows is I buy vehicles, right? I love vehicles. I think automobiles I really do love them. I like to look, read automobile, reviews. I like to go to car shows. I know, really. But I do. I just think the beauty of them aesthetically. I like the performance of a fast, vehicle. I really do. But I buy a vehicle and I hold it for a long time. I think the longest I've held a vehicle is 17 years. And people would sometimes tease me and make fun of me and say, well, I don't understand this. You get a new car. Why are you driving this old car? Now, my mind is, no, my mind was, first of all, I'm driving it because I like it, right? So when I bought it, I liked it, and I still like it 17 years later. That's why I bought it. The other part is that in my mind, I don't care that it's old. One of my cars toward the end, of its time where it was, able to keep running. It had nothing, none of the, but because when 17 years passes between when you get a car and the time that you have to let the car go to the car graveyard, so many changes happen, in terms of what's standard on a car then, and then, when you got the car 17 years ago and what's standard on the car 17 years later is different. So it didn't have power or anything, right? Power windows, power, all the stuff that cars later had. Also, my plan usually is there have been a few exceptions to this, but usually, I buy something, that's pre-owned. So the depreciation hit that you take on a vehicle hits early. And then I enjoy it, because the best thing of a vehicle is, like I said, I really enjoy vehicles. And I like all of it. I like maintaining them and cleaning them. And like I said, I'm so into this. I like to go to car shows and learn about it, and I think that's great. The thing is that I'm not defined by, based on what other people think the vehicle. I do buy what I like. What I'm saying is I hold on to it even though other people would say get something new. My point is why. It was paid for, whatever, 16 years ago. Why on earth would I get something new? It still runs. And that's part of what I'm saying. That's just a little example of what I'm saying. And it also gives me options, because I spent all these years where I don't pay for anything other than basic maintenance and everything. Then when something happens, I've saved a lot more money that would have gone to getting something newer or fancier. And that's one of those types of examples. It buys you options. And the options are always potentially a good thing, to give you your time and choices. And I really do encourage you. I hope that after the show, it got you thinking about some of these things, and I hope that you do begin to sit down and look at what you're doing and focus on options. Even options that you think, well, that almost never happens. Yeah, well, but it might. So plan ahead. And remember, holding on to the money is the key. We talk about this in almost every one of these shows in this series. It's not about spending it. It's keeping it. That's the key. Because the keeping it means that when something happens, it's unexpected, guess what you have? Money. See? Or you have an asset that produces income, or that you could borrow against, or something, or you could liquidate. I mean, you want options. And that's what gives you then the ability potentially to continue to thrive in a very dynamic, which it should be, which is great, it's a good thing, world. So thank you for being here today and being part of the program. And as always, I do encourage you to leave a rating or review wherever you found our program, whether it's on iTunes or one of our partners, and reach out to me and let me know what's on your mind, or share any show topics. So thank you for being here. Get out there and create some options.